start recording and start sharing my screen. So what we're here to talk about is my little tease for what's coming in the plant sale. I think we pretty much have topped the numbers we've ever done for a spring plant sale. We're just shy of 200 different individual plants. Poor Hayden, I'm making him add more shelves into the greenhouse so we can grow more. Because, you know, one thing, if you're not aware of, this is a big part of our revenue to keep our annual operations going. So keep that in mind. Before we delve into plants, just a couple things to note. For those of you who are friends of Renolda Gardens, we will hopefully send out, maybe by end of day today, but definitely in the morning of tomorrow, we will send out an email with the link for the pre-order form. So if you're a friend of Renolda Gardens, you can quickly get in there and kind of either place your whole order or go ahead and reserve what you want. You know, this is kind of our way of still having you know, the friends early access to the plants. If you aren't a friend, it's very easy. I love it. Stephen's team really worked hard to get things into the 21st century where you can actually go online and quickly become a friend of the gardens. And we do encourage you to do that. That all supports our annual operations every year. It's critical to what we do and critical to moving forward for the garden. So, like I said, if you don't get an email from us by noon tomorrow with the link, reach out and either we'll check and see if you're current, or we'll try to get that rectified if we somehow missed you. Couple things, we will stop taking orders Wednesday night around midnight, just so we can have time to start getting everything pulled. We've got, like I said, we've got a lot of plants to move. We got a lot of work ahead of us next week. So, you know, if you can help us by getting those orders in, unfortunately, I don't have a way to do a running inventory. Otherwise, I would love it if we did, but we don't. So it is first come, first served, and we'll let you know what you got. I'll try to get cranking on that as quick as I can. And we'll, you know, as your order comes in, you should get an email shortly, not shortly thereafter, but letting you know what you've got. But all other shopping, other than buying, you know, pre-ordering, will happen on Saturday, April 24th. So, and if you need to, we are asking that you book your time just so we can have safe numbers. Even though this is happening on the front lawn of Renolda House, we don't want to have 200 people show up all at once. And it's just, it's the way things are these days, and it's the easiest way for us to do that. So if you go online to renoldagardens.org/events, you will be able to reserve your time and move, you know, be able to do that. Let's see. And again, it is being held on the front lawn of Renolda House from 8 to 2. So with that being said, I'm trying to make sure that this is recording. I believe it is. Yeah, it is. Good. Whew. I keep forgetting that to start that on some of these things. I get so excited about the talk, but this is going to be exciting. I'm only highlighting about a third of the plants that we've got, because I'd be exhausted and you'd be really tired of hearing from me. So we're going to kind of go through some of the new things that we've got. We always try with the plant sale to bring in some new things, some things that we haven't tried, but we do take an educated guess on where we're getting these from. Most of these come from Walter's Gardens. I happen to know their head of new plant development. He's a stand-up guy. He's like 6'8". Hans Hansen, he's a fantastic breeder, but a real fun guy, but he does some great things. So anything that comes out of Walters, I feel like if it's got his stamp of approval, I feel pretty safe. One of the first things, I don't know how many of you have grown Agastache. There's a lot of different forms of this. The pollinators and hummingbirds absolutely love it, hence the name hummingbird mint. It is a fantastic plant. There's a lot of different, there's yellows, there's oranges. We chose this kind of, I'm horrible with colors. I pretty much deal with primary colors, but I guess you'd call that a purple, a rosy purple. But this will flower pretty much all season long. The real trick to growing Agastache is do not let it have wet feet. It likes to be somewhat dry. One good thing for those of you who have deer, it does have that mint type foliage where it's got fragrance. So deer generally, I will never say they don't. They will eat a Buick if they're hungry enough, but generally anything with aromatic foliage they stay away from. So, you know, good long blooming summer perennial is this Agastache Rosy Posy. This is something that I think will be in every plant sale from here to eternity, because I don't see the need going away nor the desire to have butterfly weed in your garden. It's a fantastic plant. It's tough, it's durable. Definitely don't put it in a place where you're going to want to move it later on because it likes just setting in one place. But this is just our native butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. If orange really doesn't do it for you, we also have gotten this wonderful selection called Hello Yellow, which is a beautiful bright yellow. You can see this in the wild. You'll see some yellow forms, you'll see some reddish forms. Now, the individual plant will be fine. If it sets seed and starts setting seeds around, you could get some orange, seedlings from that. But the individual plant that you get will stay yellow. It's a fantastic, like I said, it still attracts the pollinators just like everything else. Great, summer blooming, tough perennial. It's our native butterfly weed. Baptisias are the new heucheras. There's like 100 different selections coming out. So we're not going to offer too many, but we're trying to pick a couple each year, a little something different. Blue bubbly and pink truffle. What can you say about Baptisia? One thing to make sure is make sure where you plant it is where it's going to stay. They're tough as nails, and one of the reasons they are is once they get established, that root, I got embarrassed at the Ralston Arboretum when we were thinning out the Baptisia collection. I thought I was digging up a tree root. It was a Baptisia root. It was almost woody. I felt embarrassed that a perennial had kicked my butt, because once they get entrenched, leave them be. They aren't happy being moved. It'll take a couple years for them to recover, but these are two wonderful selections that have been made, a nice pink one, a nice blue one. I know Hans is working with Tony Avent with some of his selections on Baptisia, and there's some just great things coming out. It's a great perennial. One note, if you have Baptisia, sometimes they can get like a leaf miner. At that point, you can actually cut them to the ground and they'll reflush. They won't rebloom, but they will reflush. But they're a fantastic plant for the garden, a great native. This one, I don't think it had been named PPA, the Perennial Plant Association Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year yet, but I told Hayden I wanted to get this because I want to add some of this into our rose garden, because this is a long, almost all summer season flowering perennial. The pollinators love it. I just want to use this as kind of like a, almost like a bed skirt for the rose garden to fill in underneath to make sure we've got some beauty in the rose garden when the roses take a break. But it also has that benefit of being a great pollinator plant. Again, it is in the mint family. So again, not a favorite of deer, but calamint. And like I said, this was just recently named the plant of the year. So great timing on that, especially because usually when that happens, you can't get it. The availability gets wiped out real quick. But another great plant, great pollinator plant. I still, after traveling in Europe and seeing how epimediums are used so extensively there, and then you come back here and it's like they're the novelty plant, I don't get it. This is a great perennial for dry shade. Now, that being said, that is not its preferred location, is dry shade. It will live in dry shade. If you give it a little bit of, nicer conditions of a little bit of moisture, it'll do even better. But these are two old selections. They're durable. The spring color on them can be fantastic, where you get these red flushes into the new growth. I can't remember if these two varieties are evergreen or not. There's tons of different epimediums out there. There's running ones, there's clumping ones, but these are two mainstays that have been around for a long time. But great evergreen to semi-evergreen perennial for the garden, also deer resistant. So, we definitely want to keep adding every year, highlight some different epimediums because they're great for, that area that we all can't stand to garden in, which is dry shade because it's so difficult. But this is a great option to look at. And after a couple of years, you can dig them up and divide them and start spreading it out a little bit more. So always keep that in mind, especially my dad, because he's got a couple clumps that I'm coming after for soon. Daylilies, sometimes it's hard to get excited about daylilies, but there's some great ones out there. This is a relatively new one on the left, handwriting on the wall. I think this one we got sent as our bonus plant. But it is a rebloomer, real, beautiful. I mean, what more can you say about a daylily? They're pretty much indestructible. The one on the right, I actually wanted us to get because I needed to add it into the blue and yellow garden. It's an old variety, probably at least 90 years old, Hyperion. This is back before we bred the fragrance out of daylilies. Hyperion actually has a nice kind of a lemony fragrance to it. It will rebloom. It does help to deadhead it a little bit, but it's a tall flowering one. I can't remember if this is the one that they had planted next to the small fountain in front of what was the hollies. But when I look at the photos, it just looks kind of messy the way that is. So we'll probably put this one in more of the blue and yellow garden and go with a dwarf yellow one in front of that area. So it isn't, daylily, about the same size as your shrubs. It looked a little untidy. So we're gonna kind of tweak the plan on that one. But Hyperion is a fantastic daylily. Red hot pokers, I got to admit, when I was in my horticultural infancy, I hated red hot poker. It just seemed, it was the old variety. It never looked good to me. But then working for Tony Avent, he had a red hot poker trial. And he had tons of different species, different cultivars, and it like everything else working there, it opened my eyes up. And since that time, there has been a lot of breeding going on with red hot poker. So you've got solid colors now, like this one, Gold Rush, that we've got. I wanted to get a couple of these to put in the blue and yellow garden, see how they do. We're, kind of like I said, we're kind of playing around with different plants to see what's going to look really good, what's going to make sure we've got color from, start to finish. But this is a wonderful all yellow one. There's some other great ones out there. There's one called Coalescence that has almost bluish foliage, but we'll start probably playing around with more of these. Some of the new ones will reflower. This one we're going to learn as along with you to see how well it does for us. But the fact that it's coming from Walters, I feel like it's a good variety. This is a plant that I first saw about 2 years ago when we actually could still travel. American Public Gardens Association had their national conference in DC, and we were visiting Janet Draper's home garden. She was polite enough to let us park at her house so we didn't have to pay the exorbitant valet fees at the hotel. But she toured us around her garden, and I saw this patch it was a wonderful little ground cover with yellow flowers. I'm like, what is that? It was a Lismachia, and normally when I hear that, Jeff was mentioning this early about the Lismachia clethroides, the gooseneck loosestrife. It's like run the opposite way. But this is a native. It does fantastic. It's not aggressive like some other loosestrifes, and this one was actually selected, and it was fun watching on Facebook. I'm in all these weird plant geek groups. This was selected by a native plant nursery out in Tennessee called Grow Wild. One of the gentlemen that runs the nursery, along with his wife, Terry, They do a native plant podcast, but they actually selected this. It's been being sold as Lismachia lanceolata variety purpurea. That doesn't exist. This was a selection they made with this wonderful kind of reddish purple growth to it that will flower pretty much all summer long. So we've got a handful of these, not a lot, but we do have about 16 of these that we'll sell. We're going to put a few in the garden, but a great, tough, long season blooming perennial. And don't be scared by the fact that it's a loosestrife. I'm just now seeing that chats are coming in, so let me I'll try to answer most of these when we go through, but they just now, I noticed that they were coming in, sorry. Phlox, this is something Adrian, my wife, picks on me because I love Phlox divaricata and I just want to buy flat upon flat upon flat of this. It's a wonderful native perennial. If you get your garden conditions where you've got nice, heavily organic soils, they'll seed around, which is wonderful. Back when we first were working at Plant Delights, the woodland was full of this because it's seeded all over. And unfortunately, it always flowered about a week before the open house, so no one saw it. But the entire woodland would turn into what felt like a cloud. It was just filled with this. I used this along the azalea path at High Point University. We're offering a couple of the different ones I used. We've got Maybreeze, which is a white flowered one, and then Blue Moon, which is this kind of, I wouldn't call that blue, it's more of a light purple. Again, let these go to seed and they'll start seeding around in your garden. And it's a wonderful thing to have. It does have a light fragrance to it, but it's just such a wonderful perennial, and it's native, and your pollinators will go crazy over it. Another phlox this is another kind of ground cover one, Phlox stolonifera Sherwood Purple. Slightly different, but the divaricata will tend to be semi-evergreen for you. Same for the creeping phlox. So that's nice. It's great to be kind of planted at the bases of some of your bulbs because it'll help cover it. But again, this will seed around a little bit, not a bad thing. Because then you might plant Sherwood Purple and you might get some seedlings that are white. There are pink versions of these. We unfortunately, there was none available this year, but we'll continue adding them in the plant sale. Moving on to some of our tall phloxes. This is one that if you don't like it, blame Adrian because she raved about it to me. She had these planted at Senior Botanical Garden. What's great is they start early in the season before most of your tall garden phlox starts flowering. So hence the name Fashionably Early. Great mildew resistance, and they actually will reflower later on in the season. So you could have this to extend your garden phlox timeline in your garden. So this would come into bloom. Then, after it wraps up, your regular, David and some of those varieties would flower midsummer. And then towards the end of summer, this will come into flower again. Sometimes it does do, it benefits from getting a little bit of a haircut to get them to reflower. But, the important thing with phlox is, man, it better not have powdery mildew because they can look, it doesn't matter how good the flowers are. When the plant is white with powdery mildew, I don't want it. But all these have been bred to be clean. So this one actually will hang out at about 2.5 feet tall. So, not tremendously tall, but about 2.5. And then you can blend it with this other one that's come out called Opalescence. This is in, I'm forgetting what series. This is another series that Walters has bred. And this was the standout in terms of mildew resistance. So this one will be topping about 30 to 36 inches tall, wonderful kind of light pink with a dark pink eye to it. Obviously I got some of these to start looking at some, new phlox to add into the gardens here. So we're looking forward to seeing how, I feel confident that it's going to live up to hype because like I said, the Fashionably Early series, Adrian has just raved about. So we made sure to add those into the mix this year. Balloon flower, this is an old-fashioned favorite. But what's nice about this selection, this is a more of a dwarf selection. We used to grow the old ones in my parents' garden, and always the trick was about 2-3 inches tall, pinch the top out so it branches and doesn't flop and fall over. This one is dwarf, so you don't have to worry about it, and it flowers pretty much the whole season long. And obviously the name, it has before it bursts open, they look like little balloons, and it's kind of fun as a kid to go pop them open. But just a fantastic long blooming perennial. It does have more of a taproot. So again, this is something that probably, make sure where you're planting it is where you want to keep it, because it probably wouldn't be the happiest thing to move around in the garden. But if you want long season color, balloon flower is an easy one to go with. And this one, like I said, is dwarf. I think this is the one I used at High Point, and I noticed it actually seeded a lot. And I don't think I'd be that upset having more of this in the garden, where you have the option of pulling it out if you don't like it. But great tough perennial. Scabiosa, this is actually an older perennial, but this will flower pretty much say early summer to late summer. It isn't going to be absolutely covered in bloom, but it'll keep sending up flowers pretty much all through the season. Not tremendously tall. It'll be about 1.5 feet tall, but it's a good, tough performing perennial. This came out of Warburton Nursery in England, and this one, if you ever grew Scabiosa Butterfly Blue, it's the same breeder. So and he had very, very, very high standards. Trying to get anything out of him was difficult. But Pink Mist is a wonderful, durable perennial, so you can get nice flowers, probably do well as a cut flower. And then Stokesia, or Stokesia. It's named after Jonathan Stokes, who was a Scottish botanist. So, good to know, since that's named after him, his name was Stokes, so Stokesia. But great perennial. Back in the 60s and 70s, this was grown from seed. So you'd get anything under the sun, but most of it, pretty much flopped over. It wasn't a really tidy looking plant. But by doing it by seed, you got different, colors, and there's a yellow one. I'm not particularly fond of it, called Mary Gregory. But what happened in the 80s is we figured out how to propagate these clonally. And this woman, Peachie Saxon, in Mississippi, had this seedling come up in her garden that stood upright, had great habit. So we were able to propagate this. And it's funny because I've seen it sold as Peachie, and I'm like, it's blue, that's not peach. And then I finally, learned the history and realized her name was Peachie. But this one and Omega Skyrocket are probably the only two that are really good upright growing. But this was, this was a perennial in the 80s, and it still is good today. So fantastic one, blooms pretty much throughout the summer. Again, it will benefit from a little bit of deadheading, but your pollinators will love it. And it is a native, so it's got that riding for it too. So those were some of the perennials. Now jumping into some of the annuals and tender perennials. These are some of the things that I keep bringing in, all these oddball things, because it fills my fix on having weird things in the garden. This is a thing that I brought in, Erianthum nigrum, black leaves skyflower. Ignore the white flowering thing in the back. We're going to hopefully try to build up numbers on that this summer, but this is a plant you want to grow for foliage. It will flower towards, someone's asked about the Stokesia, that's probably about maybe 2 feet tall, maybe 1.5 feet. I'll try to answer those as they come through. It's kind of hard. But this one is fantastic for foliage. It's a great contrast, like doing something with that calamentha where you'd have a contrast of foliage with this. but it'll keep this dark near black foliage throughout the whole summer, and then gets these white little spikes of flowers late summer. But it's fantastic to have that color in the garden. It's kind of fun to play with. This is a plant that I don't understand. We had this in the sale last year, and I think one person bought it, and it was my sister-in-law. I don't know why people didn't scoop it up, and then this year we don't have quite the numbers we did. But this is another plant, fantastic for foliage. It's Euphorbia cotinifolia. So if you've grown cotinus, you know, the purple smoke bush, that's what it's named for. Obviously, this is Euphorbia. It's related to poinsettias. Be mindful of the sap. Some people can have a reaction to that latex sap. But this is fantastic for full sun to give you that wonderful kind of wine red, purple red foliage throughout the whole summer. It does flower, but who cares? It's just a fantastic plant. This is something that you can actually, we dug ours up and brought it inside. It actually went completely dormant, dropped every leaf, and it's sat in our sunroom the whole winter, and now it's leafing back out. So you can bring it in, you can pot it up. It is tender though, but it's just a fantastic foliage plant for the garden. Let's see some of that. Poisonous to pets like poinsettias are, probably. So tell your pets not to eat it. But you know, I have never seen, like, it's one of those things that I don't force any plants on my pet, but and I doubt anyone does, but I never can figure out, you know, well, there's a lot of things that are poisonous if you eat them, but anyhow, this is a plant I remember growing at the Ralston Arboretum, and then we lost it, and then Adrian had it, and I think she had a couple plants. I got them for growing when I was at High Point, and then bringing them here. A horrible name, horrible common name, Galphimia, gracilis, or Thyrsalis. You know, hopefully no one blushes. The other name is golden showers. But flowers all, you know, once the heat starts kicking in and it starts flowering, it will not stop until frost. This we had in the hot dog bed, I think 2 years ago. I think we had it in there last year, but we got asked about this. We have a handful of these propagated, so those will be available for sale. And it just, you know, once you get it in the ground, it's no muss, no fuss. It's a fantastic plant. Now we're going to talk about the next thing is Gomphrena. I think most people are familiar by now with Gomphrena fireworks, which is similar to this, but with green foliage. And it's a fantastic kind of, you know, see-through, weaves through other plants. It's got this loose habit. And I love it. The pollinators love it. I actually think it's been semi-perennial for me before because it actually forms almost like a little potato. But then I got so excited when this came out. Obviously, I have no taste when it comes to color because I've been told pink and yellow are no-no, but who cares? This one, it's going under two different names, either Horton's Revenge or Cosmic Flare. I don't care what you call it. I think it's a showstopper in the garden. Again, just like fireworks, you know, it flowers all summer long, and I've been pretty impressed because sometimes with these yellow foliage plants, you put them out in our heat and humidity in the south, and they'll just, you know, might as well pour gasoline on it. They'll just burn up. But this holds its color well. It did fantastic. So this is one I'm happy that we can offer. Now, this next one, I saw this offer and I'm like, oh, great, a knockoff of fireworks. Why am I going to pay more money for it? So I bought one. But I bought one of these and I bought one of fireworks because I wanted to see, okay, what's the big difference? And I've got to say, while fireworks is nice and it has its place, it's kind of loose and sprawly and all over the place, Truffula Pink actually stayed nice and compact and had a real nice habit to it. So if you have a need for, you know, just tons of blooms, but a more tidy habit, this is one to go for. We'll use it in some of our displays, I'm sure, but we've got, you know, a handful to sell. I think it's going to be a fantastic plant. Like I said, you know, I'm always skeptical of going, oh, wow, another knockoff. And then I'll buy it and see what it does and if it's worthwhile. And I actually feel like after growing this last year, I was pretty impressed with it. So Truffula Pink, Gomphrena. And again, this is also a great cut flower. So if any of you have grown globe amaranth, it's a pretty bulletproof plant. This is a grass that we've had in the gardens for the last 2 years. I'm glad that we remember at the end of the season to grab the seed because it's really not available. It's hard to find it anywhere else, but what I love about this is for the majority of the summer, it almost reminds me of blue fescue, where it's just this little round bun in the garden with kind of a bluish cast to it. And then starting about midsummer, it'll start sending up its blooms, and these blooms are this wonderful pink. I think it's a beautiful grass. I think it's fun to play around with colors with it, with that contrast with the pink and the blue. Ours in one bed did kind of pooped out at the end of the season. It was very strange, but I don't know what went on. But this is a great annual to have in the garden. Kind of a nice texture to have in the garden. When it blooms, you get a little wind, you get movement on it. But pink savanna grass, I think that's it's basically just a species, and we just grab the seed and sow the seed, and it's pretty no muss, no fuss, but a nice texture, nice blue, kind of chalky blue for the garden. This is a great penta. If any of you have grown any of the pentas, this was one that came out of Greg Grant in Texas, but it's a fantastic variegated form of pentas called Stars and Stripes. I'm glad we've got the numbers to be able to offer that this year. We hacked on it a couple times to make sure we had plenty of stock going into winter so that we would be able to offer it. But it is kind of all over the place. Sometimes you might get a solid green shoot, but it's just a fun combination of variegation and that red flowers, and the hummingbirds will absolutely love this. I think Amy is watching, so she's doing a hummingbird garden. So if you've been here in the last few days, there's a giant hummingbird sculpture in the garden right now that Hayden built. But this might be a fun thing to add into the garden because the red, of course, everyone thinks that hummingbirds, gravitate towards red. They gravitate towards anything with nectar, really. This is a salvia. There's a great salvia nursery called Flowers by the Sea, and I always have loved Salvia chiapensis. Just something about it. I like the color, I like the form, I like the texture. And when they talked about how it never would set seed, and then all of a sudden one year there was a seedling, and there were a few seedlings, but this one had, and no lie, everything is about twice the size on it. So it had bigger leaves, bigger form, bigger flowers. And this did really well for us. It took a little while to get going, but once like midsummer hit, it was a blooming machine for the rest of the year. And most of your salvias are hummingbird magnets. They love them. So this is one that I think it was only released last year. So I think it's pretty cool that we're able to offer some numbers for sale for it this year. Some other salvias, this one, White Mischief, came out. I actually was working for the company that was representing the breeder from South Africa back in the mid-2000s. He had this, and then Daniel's Dream, which is that pink flowered one. The good thing is White Mischief, I think, never got a patent, so we can sell it. We can propagate it and sell it. It's not, I wouldn't consider it a hardy plant. So if you're looking for it, it's great cut flower, great dried flower. But it's a great plant in the garden, but it's not perennial. Now, the Salvia leucantha on the right, Greenwood, I got this from a colleague. He works up at the University of Maryland. This has been reliably hardy for him up in Maryland. And I went out yesterday because, putting this talk together, I'm like, well, let me go see if this thing's coming back for us. It's coming back. So granted, we didn't have the coldest year, but we had one of the wettest darn years that we've had. But this salvia is coming back. So wonderful Mexican bush sage. I always love it as it's, again, great as a cut flower, great even as a dried flower. Hummingbirds and pollinators love it. But this one, Greenwood, seems to be a bit more cold hardy than others. Seems to be. I don't know. We'll see after a couple of years how it does. But fantastic plant for it, and it'll come into flower like mid to late summer is when it really puts on its show. This was, the talked about plant along the walkway last year. Everyone wanted to know what the thing with the thorns was. So this is a member of the tomato family. So it's in the Solanaceae, but Solanum quitoense, bed of nails. It's just a great, if you want bold texture in the garden and something that really will draw your eye. We laughed when we grew this at the Ralston because a kid that was, goth and wearing all dark makeup and dark clothes, he was just fascinated by this plant. It's like, he just thought it was the coolest thing. But I've seen some fantastic designers use this and, plant something purple to pull off that purple veining in the leaves. But it's a texture like no other in the garden. I guarantee you people will ask about it because people were asking about it all the time last summer. So, that usually is a big signal of, hey, let's offer it for sale. And they actually make a juice from the fruits. I'm a little intimidated by this sucker, so I don't know exactly how you do that, because even the fruits have I don't know if they're spines or if it's just little fur on the fruit, but harvesting this has got to be, not the most joyous thing in the world. Had to have a bunch of Stachytarpheta. I'm just bonkers. That Solanum will top out at about 3, maybe 3.5 feet. So Stachytarpheta, we did this in the first kind of cultivate issue where I highlighted a bunch of the ones that we brought in. These are just a handful of them. I'm on the wait list for a couple new ones coming in. So I think we have about 8 different ones that we're offering this year. So it's kind of whatever your flavor is in terms of color, whether it's dark purple, lavender, red. I still want someone to go down to, I think, Columbia to find that black flowered one for me, please. Anyone? But what's great about them, the hummingbirds love them and the butterflies love them. So it's a fantastic plant. It's not going to overwhelm you with color, but it will continue to flower all summer long. And some of them, like chiapensis, has really nice kind of glossy foliage to it. But I love these plants. Like I said, it's almost like they bring the butterflies, which brings even more color into the garden. But it's a fun plant to have. And then Tibicina grandifolia. This is fantastic in terms of foliage because it gets this really, let's see what someone is asking. Will you know what color porterweed you're ordering? Yeah, like there's common names. There's like purple, but on the plant list, which is I forgot to mention, is posted online now. So if you go into our website and pull up the plant list, there's a link beside each one to a description and photos. So hopefully that'll help. But if you do have questions, feel free to reach out and I'll try to guide you. But this Tibicina, I love this. Even if it didn't flower, the foliage on it is fantastic. It's got that nice, bold, really fuzzy foliage. And this one did fantastic for us last summer where, midsummer it started coming into flower. Now, I don't know if it's the fact that we had these plants for a year before going in the ground and they had some woodiness to them that made them flower, or we just had a good year. I won't say 100% that they will flower, but when they do, they're spectacular. But the foliage is fun, and they'd make a great container plant as well. So going on to a few vines, we've got a whole bunch of different ones. This is one that Bob Lyons, my former director at the Ralston, had growing outside his office, and I never told Bob this because I never let him know that a plant that he liked, I liked, because we used to rib him about that all the time. But he had this draped on the wall, and it's a beautiful vine. The underside of the leaves are this dark purple. You can kind of get an idea why they call it the Rex begonia vine. It likes bright light, but I wouldn't put it out in full blazing sun. I've seen this done wonderfully. Chanticleer had it on their little outdoor patio and draping over the mantle. But it's a wonderful, flowers are nothing to ever look at. It's the foliage on this that's fantastic, and blending it with other plants. So we've got a good batch of these propagated. So those are a fantastic vine. Purple hyacinth bean, I think everyone's familiar with. We've got that, but we also have the white flowered form that makes white pods. So if purple's not up your alley, maybe white is. So, Hayden's got actually a bunch of different vines, so we might have to take advantage of some open space on the fences this year. Moon vine, if you've got kids or grandkids, you need to plant this because it's such a cool thing, because when they start unfurling, they look like soft serve vanilla ice cream. They've got this wonderful swirl, and if you're patient enough, you can almost watch them open. And the great thing is Adrian has a huge wall that's planted over at Senior, and later in the season when they start coming into flower, there are hummingbird moths, and they are moths, but they're about the size of a hummingbird, all over the place on these things. And they've got this huge proboscis that's probably about 6 inches, and they go just berserk on this. And it's got a wonderful fragrance. It's and it's great for those of us who work during the day to actually have something time for when we get home. So this will come into flower at the end of the evening. Nice to sit outside, have a cocktail, and enjoy this. But it's not new. It's a great plant. This is another plant. This can be a little mindful. This I would plant if you're looking to get Gulf fritillary butterflies, because the caterpillars absolutely love this plant. But it is one of our natives. It will spread a little bit, so be mindful of where you plant it. You might get some suckers popping up, but the butterflies love it. I think the flowers are just absolutely hardy, or absolutely stunning on this, especially just the geometry and how everything's laid out. I want to start getting some of the different ones in, if nothing else, to put them in the conservatory, some of the red flowered ones, and there's some like ultraviolet ones, but this is just our native one. It's a fantastic plant. It is a host plant for some of our pollinators, so that's another benefit to it. And then Hayden actually did this last year. I actually really liked what he did, where instead of putting this up on a trellis, he just let the, and I hate saying that, it's pseudogynoxis, it sounds like a disease, Mexican flame vine, but wonderful, member of the aster family, but it just scrambled through everything and just, filled in flowers. It was fantastic. But, long summer flowering, wonderful orange flowers. But it's kind of fun to use things in some different ways. We do have a handful of different succulents and houseplants to offer. The agave Joe Hauk. This is probably one of the better variegated agaves, except for the fact it's not hardy, so you do need to bring it in. But if you're looking for texture in the garden, you really can't beat agaves. It's fun to take this one and put purple calibrachoa underneath it. Those are two things that don't really require a lot of water. It would be an easy container plant that you don't have to water that much during the summer. And it does, as you can see here, it pups very easily. So when you unpot it, we'll have a pint of blood just as backup, but you can pull those pups off and start sharing it with others. But it's a great, texture foliage plant in the garden. And then here's this weird thing. This is I think a Mexican species, but we do have Manfreda virginica that it's basically a deciduous agave. And this is kind of the start of the whole mangave craze, where they started crossing Manfreda with agaves and started just, now they're like Baptisias, there are like a million of them. But this is one that came out a long time ago from Yucca-Do Nursery called Chocolate Chips. It will go dormant and the leaves will die off, but Again, I can't remember if this one's fully hardy or not, but it does. No matter what you do, don't let it have wet feet. But again, you get this wonderful, amazing texture on a plant that really doesn't have a high water need. So if you've got some pots in the far corner of the yard and you want to, be able to neglect them a little bit, this Manfredo would be fantastic for that. This is a plant that I got introduced to years ago, and I had a couple plants, and through leaf cuttings, we've kept it going. And man, the two parent plants that we've got here have done fantastic in the greenhouse. If you've grown African violets, this is in the same family. It used to be called Chirida, now it's Primulina. I don't know what it's called. They're fantastic little indoor plants. I've seen them used outdoors. You can put them in some light shade, and they'll do fantastic. Real nice foliage, easy to propagate. If you've got kids or grandkids, it's an easy plant to stick a leaf cutting and propagate it. But these are just two different ones that I had. It's kind of, there's a wonderful yellow one I want to get, but just wonderful little house plant. Or outdoor container plant for the summer. But just like African violets, don't let it go past 40 degrees. Otherwise, it's toast. I remember we had a couple of different things like this, and we had a power outage and everything in the room died. But, nice thing for containers and some shade. And then a few woody plants that we've added in. A lot of people commented on the butterfly bush that we added into the gardens last year, which was Grand Cascade. This is part of that series. It's not as big, so maybe that's why this one wasn't grand. But this is Lavender Cascade. It's a little bit smaller in stature, about 2 feet tall, 2 by 3 feet wide. Blooms are not quite as huge, but it will flower all summer long. And I know Buddleias kind of have a little bit of a bad rep, but those are pretty much the old varieties that were out there, like Black Knight. Especially like in the Pacific Northwest, they're a weedy mess. They're horrible. Here, a lot of the new breeding, they've involved so many different species. These things have become almost functionally sterile. Definitely Denny Werner's work has been tremendous in giving us sterile butterfly bushes, but they still produce nectar. And whoever's going out there saying that, they're not getting any nutrition out of this, that's complete bunk. Every time I used to go to Piedmont, Carolina, the butterflies were going crazy over the butterfly bush area. They're not going to go to something they're not getting any nutrition from. Sugar is sugar. So this is a great, nice little compact butterfly bush for pretty much all summer long blooming. Edgeworthia, if you haven't grown this, you need to. If you already have one, you need to. Just fantastic Daphne relative that flowers pretty much January, end of January into February. Wonderful fragrance, kind of grows naturally in this rounded shape. But we do have a handful of these to offer for the sale. And then one of our native hydrangeas, this is Hydrangea arborescens, Haas Halo. This was selected by a gardener up in Pennsylvania, and it was selected for these huge lace caps that this thing has on it. And I've seen this in person, and it's pretty stunning. Usually, mop heads like Annabelle are the show, but one of the things to think about for this is one I've also seen a number of people comment on the number of pollinators that go crazy on this plant. So you can get beauty and function, ecological function out of this plant. So, and it's native, fantastic hydrangea. And then I think our last one on some of the slides, this we actually got from Nancy Janeway. She was telling me about, she had this gorgeous Philadelphus in her garden with gold foliage. It's an older variety, but you can't find it for sale anywhere. And she's like, well, take some cuttings. Well, we took cuttings, grew them, took cuttings, grew them, took cuttings. So we have a bunch of these. It's got fantastic fragrance, this wonderful gold foliage. We're excited to be able to offer it. I know I want one for my garden. I think if it were not for the gold foliage, I would swap this out for the Philadelphus or the mock orange that's in the lower formal guards, because those have no fragrance whatsoever. And what's the point of growing mock orange if not for fragrance? Just wrapping this up, we do, have a bunch of herbs for sale. Dill, oregano, lavender, phenomenal. This is aptly named. It's one of the best lavenders to grow out there. Again, you'll still need good drainage, but it is a fantastic plant in the garden. Stevia, parsley. Well, we couldn't decide on a favorite basil, so we grew them all. So we've got a bunch of different basils. I will say this one Greek columnar is, there's a variegated form of it called Pesto perpetuoso. But just the plain green one, it's kind of cool to put in a container because it has a neat, habit to it. But it's a basil that doesn't flower. I've never seen it flower, so you don't have to worry about deadheading it. So it's nice to not have to worry about that. But so we've got purple leaf basil, sweet basil, some of the spicy globe type. So I think a really nice selection of basil to offer this year. A couple different rosemaries. Blue Lady is a weeping one. Barbecue is one that's selected because it has straight stems, so you technically could use it as skewers for doing barbecue, like some chicken. And it's also been one of the hardier ones that I've grown out there. A couple different peppers that we've got. And then, of course, everyone is always looking towards us for tomatoes. We've got a nice variety of different tomatoes available now. We will continue just wrapping the tomato sale in with the big spring sale. And members will get first dibs on these, of course. So we've kind of reduced our numbers on these. So be mindful, if you want to get some tomatoes, need to get in. So I hope that's been a good whirlwind of like a third of what we're growing. So, prepare to be overwhelmed. And remember that the plant sale is one of our key things to, keeping our operating budget going. That's, just our general operations. You want beds mulched, we need money. But, at least this is a fun way to do it. And just as a reminder, friends will get that opportunity to pre-order things and book things ahead of time. So you can easily go online. If you're not a friend, become one. We'd love to have you. And then remember to book your time slot for picking up plants. And we're going to try to, so pre-sales, Julia, you should know when pre-sales start now. We're going to hopefully get the email out either end of day today or tomorrow morning. You'll get your email with the link to the order form. If you don't get an email by noon, then reach out to us, because either maybe your membership lapsed or maybe we missed it, or maybe it just came in yesterday and it's not on the email list yet. But we don't have Emerald Towers basil. Sorry. Someone was asking which plants are native. On the plant sale list on the website, there's links to each plant, so you can look it up. It's kind of a lot to do to just get this done, but I think we've got a good handful of natives in there. Yes, you can join today and be part of the pre-sale. We'd actually love for you to join. But we're tremendously excited about what we've got. I think it's a lot of fun plants. I mean, Lord knows, let's not grow boring plants. My buddy Mark Wethington in Ralston life is too short for boring plants. So we figure with almost 200 different ones to pick from, we think that you'll all find something to bring home into the garden and support your favorite garden. So with that being said, I will stop sharing my screen. And I don't know if anyone has any more questions. If you want to, put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them. other than that, I'd say go to the website, go to, you can find the plant sale information again at renoldagardens.org/events. And that's also where we have the plant sale list is on there. And like I said, I went through and did a web link to each plant so you can look it up, whether it's from the Missouri Botanic Garden or a nursery with descriptions and photos. So start making your list and checking it twice because, well, we don't care if you're naughty or nice. If you're a friend of the garden, we don't care what you do. But oh, we do have the Mexican sunflower, so that will be on there. Someone just asked about that. But I think we've got a lot of fun plants, and we're still kind of kicking around some ideas to do maybe some later sales to keep going. But it's all about plants. So we thank you for your time, and we hope everyone has a great day. And like I said, if you don't get an email by noon tomorrow, then reach out to us and we'll double check to see, if there's a glitch in the system or something. We'll look. And someone was asking about if it's too late to come to the art walk. I'm assuming that's the tour we're doing at 4:30. No, it's not. So feel free to go online and book, and we'll see you at 4:30. But other than that, I'm going to go and get outside and take a quick breath and then finish getting this order form done. So thank y'all for your attention. Y'all have a great day.